Good evening. Today's daf is daf Ayin Tes in Kidushin. We're almost done. We're going to start from the Mishnah daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis. Till now, the last few blot we've been discussing the halachas of Yuchsin, and now we're going to go back to the halachas of Kidushin. Okay, so the Mishnah says like this: Misha nasan reshus l'shluchay lekadish es bitei. If a person who gave reshus to a shliach to mekadesh his daughter, and like Rashi explains, we're talking about somebody who's a ketana. A girl who's a ketana, so the father has reshus now to be mekadesh his daughter al tzaketana. The Torah gives reshus, and now this father went and sent a shliach to go and be mekadesh a chassan for his daughter. And what happened? V'halahu v'kitcha. And then at the same time, the father went and was mekadesh her to somebody else. So who's she mekadesh to? So the Mishnah says like this: Im shaloi kadma, if his kiddushin preceded that of the shliach. So then kiddush of kiddushin. His kiddushin is a good kiddushin. Why? Because the Rashi says is because he's mevatel the fact that he went and took another chassan, showing that he's mevatel the shlichus. Now, but if his shliach preceded his own kiddush of kiddushin, then the kiddushin of the shlichus is a valid kiddushin. Now, v'im and yadua, if it's not known whose kiddushin came first, so then the din is like this. Shneim neistin get, both men have to give both men might have to give the girl a get in order to correct. The father sends Reuben and says, go be mekadesh this chassan to my daughter. Then the father changed his mind and went as mekadesh himself. Went to Shimon and says, come to be mekadesh to my daughter. So, if the shliach is first, the shlichus kedushin goes first. If the father is first, so he's mevatel the shliach, and now his kedushin takes precedence.
The shliach himself, instead of being a shliach for somebody else, with the father,
yeah, in a chanam, but that's not the case in the Mishnah. No. V'kitcha means the father. I also, when I was preparing, I also thought that it means that he went and was mekadesh, not himself. Holchol v'kitcha means the father was mekadesh now for somebody else, his daughter to somebody else. So now shneim neistin get. So the halacha is that both give a get in order to render her permitted to marry somebody else. So basically, Reuben and Shimon have to give this girl a get because the suffix. V'im ratzu. Now, if they both agree, so then echad neistin get v'echad kenes. One gives a get and the other marries her. Next case to the Mishnah. Now, before we were talking about that, the father, the girl was a ketana, and the father first sent the shliach, and then he decided he's going to be mekadesh to another guy himself. So there's different dinim. Now, what happened over here? Here, a woman who authorized a shliach to be mekadesh her. You're going to be my shliach to be mekabel kiddushin for me. The lady tells now, tells Rachel, go and accept kiddushin for me. And then she went and was mekadesh herself to somebody else. So what's the din over here? So im shala kadma, if her own kiddushin preceded that of the shliach, kiddushin. So her kiddushin is a valid kiddushin. Im shal shlichu kadmo, and if the shlichus, the agent precedes her, then kiddushav kiddushin, and the shliach's kiddushin is a valid kiddushin. Now, if you don't know, shneim neistin get, both have to give a get. If they agree, echad neistin la get, echad kenes. So the question is obvious. The Chayr is saying the same case twice. The first case is that the father sends a shliach and then he's mekabel kedushin himself, and the second case is the girl sent a shliach and then decides she's going to go and be mekabel kedushin from somebody else. So the Chayr is the same logic. Why do you have to say it twice? That's the Gemara focuses right away. It's tzricha. It's necessary to state the halacha with regards to the kiddushin, to the daughters, as well with regards to the woman who's mekadesh herself. If the Mishnah taught the halacha only with regards to the father himself, so I would say mishum the gara kim lebi yuchsin. One might say that because a man is expert with regards to yuchsin, and his decision to be mekadesh his daughter on his own after having appointed a shliach must have due to, let's say, the yuchos of the man that he found willing to marry her. But with regard to a woman who's not an expert in yuchsin, kiddushin, one might say that her Kiddushin should not be considered a valid Kiddushin, as she still intends for her shliach to be able to accept Kiddushin for her from a man with superior yuchsin. So Kamash Shalom, we don't say that. Now, and if the Mishnah taught Allah only regarding to the woman herself, you would say that because a woman is particular about whom she marries, in other words, she's careful when selecting a husband for herself, therefore, she would have chosen the partner she deems more suitable and would not want the shliach to act on her behalf after she had found someone that she approves of. But with regards to the father, you would say, okay, he doesn't really care. And he may authorize the shlichus in any case, so therefore, that's what the Mishnah needs to say in both cases. Okay, now the Mishnah says, now the Gemara says, Itmar, it was stated, we have the Amoraim discussed the following question. Kitcha avia baderech, if the father was mekadesh her on the way when he was traveling, and v'kitcha atzma be'ir, and in the meantime, she was mekadesh herself in the city. Okay, so now, the Gemara is going to discuss this, but let's learn pshat and then we'll dissect what's going on over here. He was mekadesh for her a chassan while he was traveling, and then she went as makabel kedushin for herself from somebody else. And now, what's the case? When it came to Beis Din, Barahi Begeris, she is now a grown woman. So Rav says, Harahi Begeris Lefanenu. She's a grown woman at present, and the father cannot currently be mekadesh her. Therefore, even if he was mekadesh at some point, the Kiddushin is assumed not to have taken place. That's what Rav says. Because the fact is, what are we dealing with now? You have a Begeris, and a father can't be makabel for a Begeris. Shmuel says no. Chayshina the Kiddushin Shneim, we are concerned with regards to the Kiddushin of both of them. That's the machlekes. So now the Gemara asks, Emas, when exactly the father, the Gemara is trying to understand, when did the father was makabel Kiddushin? If we say it occurred during the 6 months, when the daughter was no longer, right, between 12 and 12 and a half, she has a state of a naira. So for the first 6 months, when the daughter was no longer a ketana, so she has a status now of a naira. And then from 12 and a half, she's a begeris. So if you're going to tell me that it's b'seich shisha, b'hanema Rav, hari begeris lefanena, would Rav say we have a grown woman at present? Hashtahu de bogla. It's reasonable to say that it's only now that she has reached her maturity. In other words, we assume that the status of a grown woman. And in that case, her father's Kiddushin should take effect. Why? Since the father can be Mekadesh's daughter when she's an Ida. So Rav will not say that the father's Kiddushin is disregarded. So what's the case of it? If it's B'seich Shisha, for sure the Kiddushin is good. Rav will not tell you that, how do you begeres lefanenu? And Ella, rather you're going to say La'achar Shisha. So you're going to say, okay, the case is after 6 months. So Shmuel's going to tell you that we're chayshish for the Kiddushin. Shmuel clearly says that there's the status, the difference between a young woman and a grown woman is 6 months alone. And after which the girl has the status of a begeris, which means her father can no longer be Mekadesh Kiddushin. So make up your mind. If you say it's B'seich Shisha, you have a Shailan Rav. If you say it's La'achar Shisha, you have a Shailan Shmuel. So the Gemara says, very interesting case. We're talking about a case, the Kaddish Bahu Yoymed, the Mashtam Shisha. We're talking about where he was Mekadesh on the day that these 6 months was completed. Mamash on Yom, the end of the 6 months. Rav Omari Begeres Lefanenu. Rav says she's a grown woman at present. Midahash the Begeres, since there's therefore a chazaka that since she's now a grown woman, but Safranami Begeres, she was also a grown woman when her father was Mekadesh her in the morning. Shmuel says no. Hashtahu the Isi Simanim. Perhaps it's only now that her signs indicated puberty came, and she might still have been a young woman when her father was Mekadesh her. So that's the case over here. We're talking about that it was mamish the 31st, the 30th day of the 6 months. So Rav will tell you, the fact is, let's say they came in front of Beis Din in the afternoon. Begeres lefanenu. Shmuel says no. Maybe in the morning she wasn't a begeres, and like the Rashi says, the Mefarshim say, it's mamish a physical change. By 12 and a half, it's mamish a physical change. Okay, so now the Gemara asks. It's very. I'm going to rush it, but it's very very lamdish Gemara. Okay, Shmuel. So the Gemara asks like this: Shmuel, ma'ishnami mikveh. In what case is different from the case of a regular mikveh? Now we had this case before. A very famous question, very famous Mishnah. The Tanah we learned in a Mishnah in Mikvois. This is a Mishnah in Perek Beis, Mishnah Beis. The Tanah we learned Mikveh shenimda v'nimtza chaser. With regards to a mikveh that was known to have contained a requisite, a required amount of 40 sa of water, and what happened? V'nimtza chaser. And now you measured and found the deficient in the quantity of water. So what's the halacha? So the halacha is like this: Kol tahara shenasu al gabav l'mafreya. All pure items whose purification had been performed in it. In other words, any impure item that had been purified through this mikveh. So then, what happens? It doesn't matter whether it's in Rishus HaYochid, which we know always Rishus HaYochid we go to Chumrah, and Rishus HaRabim, which we always go to Kula. To me, it is tummy. Now, what do we see from here? We see that we look at the current situation. We don't say that it happened now and whatever the mafreya is okay. What do we see from this Mishnah? That we say the mafreya ben Rishus HaYochid, ben Rishus HaRabim is tummy. Why not? The woman should be considered. So the Elamai, we don't look at the current situation. So in this case also, the woman should be considered a grown woman at the time of the first Kidushin. And the second Kidushin, so now like this. So the second Kidushin should not take effect.
So the father's Kidushin is
What does Shmuel say? Shmuel said,
again, the first Kidushin is garnish. The second Kidushin is taken.
the question is this. Shmuel says, Chashin l'Kiddush Shneim. Right? Why? Because maybe that day in the morning when the Kabbalah Kidushin she was still a Ketana. So Shmuel says 1 second. So the Gemara asks 1 second. By the case of the mikveh shnimda v'nimtza chaser. What?
You look now. That's why you're tummy.
Right, we look now, and now that it's tummy, so it's tummy, everything's the mafreya. So the Kidushin, we should look now.
So she accepts Kidushin, so the father's Kidushin is garnish.
We look now at the situation. Now the situation, the woman's a grown woman. So the Kidushin that
she accepted herself is good Kidushin.
the Vikisha Asma Be'ir should be considered that's like Rav says, Ari Begaris Lefaneno. Right? Rav from Stam learns in the case of the mikveh. We look at the situation now. So Gemara says this. Shani Hosni Meimar, in the case of the mikveh, it's different to say. Why? Because you could say you could say like this. Since it can be said, maintain the Talmudic person on the chazaka and say the status quo, and it was not properly, didn't go to mikveh. There's a chazaka status of the item being ritually tummy, and it's supported by the current state of the mikveh, which is now deficient. You had the thing which is tummy. The tummy thing now went into the mikveh. You measure the mikveh, and the mikveh is chaser. So you say, Hamid the tum al chaskoseh. The chazaka before was, we know this cup, let's say, was tummy, right? So now you go into a mikveh, you table in the mikveh. The fact is, this it's a lot of lumdus, but the kitzer. This cup beforehand, I always let's look at the like you say, like you make a mistake on the computer, so you go like Control Delete or whatever, you go backspace. Let's go backspace. What was the backspace over here? The backspace was that it was tummy. Yeah, cheskes kashers, but yeah, no, there is. Okay, so yeah. So the Gemara, but the Gemara is going to go back for it. The Gemara says, basically, we're looking at the chefza of the thing that actually was toivel. The chazak is that it's tummy. So let's see here. So that's what he says. So now the Gemara continues to compare the two cases, like you said. Adrab. On the contrary, Hamin mikveh, like you're saying, Hamin mikveh chaskoseh ve'emelei chaser. Maintain the mikveh at this chazaka that it was known to have previously contained the required amount of arba sa, and ve'emelei chaser, and say that it was not deficient at the time that they tabled. It only was deficient when they measured it. So, Fred the Gemara, 1 second. Hadei chaser lefanecha. The fact is, there's a deficient mikveh presence, which basically counteracts the chazaka status that it contained. You have the mikveh, but you measure the mikveh now, and you have it's chaser. You have the so that you have a problem. Then you have the keli which had a chazaka before and that it was tummy. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara asks now, Harei begeres lefanecha. Here too, there's a grown woman before you, which would counteract the fact that she was previously a young woman. So the Gemara says, Hashtahu de bagra. The fact is now she reached her begeres. The Gemara asks, Hasam nami hashtahu de chaser. There too, in the case of the mikveh, one can say there's only now that it became chaser. Perhaps it contained the required amount shortly beforehand. So basically, we're going back and forth. So the Gemara says, Hasam tarti le'yosa. There, in the case of the mikveh, you have two reasons to weaken the possibility that the item is tar. Firstly, there is a deficiency in the actual mikveh. Second, the chazaka status is that it's tummy. Hacha, but here, by contrast, chad l'rusa. Here in the case, there's only one reason to weaken the possibility that she was a young woman at the time of the Kidushin, the fact that she is now a grown begeres. So you have one, when you have trei l'riusa, so you have to take that into consideration. When you have chad l'riusa, so therefore Shmuel therefore maintains that her earlier status of a young girl is not batal, and both Kidushin must take you have to go to Churma to take both Kidushin into account. Okay, so now the Gemara asks a question of Shmuel, and according to Shmuel, Maishna mechavis, what is the case different than the case of a barrel? The Tanya we learned in a brisa, if one would inspect the contents of a barrel to see if it contained enough wine to continually separate truma from it, to exempt other wine he had, so now like this, person, the din is like this, the person who was being baited the chavis to be mafresh truma on, I'm going to use this wine to be mafresh, let's say, on other things that I own. Now what happened? And then you afterwards the contents of the barrel were found to be vinegar, which cannot be set aside as truma for wine which is tevel. So kol shloshi yamim vadai, all 3 days after he had last inspected it is definitely viewed as having been wine, and any tevel wine for which truma was separated during those days is considered a good truma. Afterwards, more than 3 days after the previous inspection, it's a suffix as to whether it already turned into vinegar, and any any wine you took for which truma was separated during those days is not considered as, it's still considered as tevel. Okay, so basically, again, the case is you had a barrel of wine and you were checking, and you said, I'm going to use this barrel of wine to be mafresh truma on other things that I have. And then what happens? You check the wine 20 days later, and it was vinegar. So we say for the first 3 days it was wine. After that, then everything is vinegar. Now, before stating the difficulty of Shmuel's opinion, the Gemara first clarifies, and we raised a steer between the halacha of a barrel and that of a mikveh. Maishna dehocha vade and maishna dehocha safek. What is different in that here, with regards to mikveh, the halacha is that the items are definitely tamei, and what is the difference that there with regards to the chavis? It's a suffix whether the produce remains tevel. In both cases, the situation at present, side the mikveh being deficient, and side the contents of the barrel having turned vinegar, should lead to a definite conclusion. Just like mikveh, we're saying it's tamei, so the cheder of the barrel of wine as well. And Chanina ben Surya says, Man tnan chavis Reb Shimoni. Who is the Tana that taught the barrel? Is Reb Shimoni. The Gabi mikveh Gabi svei the nami svei mishavi. Reb Shimon, with regards to mikveh, also considered as a matter of suffix rather than definitively. So basically, there's no stira between the Brisa and the Mishnah. Now, the Tanya was taught in a Brisa called Taharish and Asal Gabel Mafreya, all pure items whose purification had been performed in it. Any Talmudic items that had been purified through going to the mikveh that was found to be deficient, he'll say B'Shus Rabim we go L'Kula as tar, B'Shus Yochid is Teilan, we suspend it. In other words, if the impure item came into contact with truma, one may not partake of the truma due to the suffix, but it's also not burned as though they were tamei vade. Okay, so that's Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says it depends. B'Shus Rabim is tar, B'Shus Yochid is Teilan. B'Shus Yochid, yeah. B'Shus Rabim we always go the L'Kula, B'Shus Yochid l'Chumra. Now, so the Gemara returns now to the question. Aval Rabbanan, but according to the Chacham, will hold that in the case of the mikveh, the items are for sure tummy. So with regard to the wine that had been exempted from truma by means of separating truma from the contents of the barrel, that should be tevel retroactively, since he holds that we go at the current status extends to the past. And this is unlike the halacha of Shmuel, who ruled that in the case of the woman who was mekadesh the two men, it's uncertain to whom she was mekudeshes. In other words, why is the case of barrel different? Why is the case of mikveh different than the case of Kidushin? So my answers, Shani Hasam, there in the case of the barrel, you could say Hamed Tevel Chaskasa. You maintain the Tevel in its chazaka. As when it first grew, it was for sure Tevel. And say it was not fixed. So again, we're going back to the same thing. Why do you maintain chazaka of the wine and say that there was no vinegar. So the Gemara says, you say now that here too is only now that she's a beger, so now also became vinegar. So the Gemara explains again, in the case of the barrel, there are two reasons to weaken the chazaka that the wine is taken truma. First, its vinegar is present. Second, the wine has a chazaka that it was tevel. However, here there's only one reason to weaken the possibility that she was a naira at the time of the Kidushin, the fact that she is now a grown woman. Shmuel therefore maintains that her earlier chazaka of a young woman is not nullified. Again, and both Kidushin must be taken into account. Okay. So the Gemara, Neima Ketanoi. Shall we say that this is Machlekes Tanoim? Now, the halacha is that a person who transfers all of his properties to others without leaving anything for himself can retract his. A person, let's say, is very, very sick. Let's say a goysid or whatever. So, and let's say he transfers all of his properties to others without leaving anything for himself. He can retract it when he gets better. Why? It's due to the chazaka that one would give away all of his possessions only if he believes that he's going to die. So now we're saying that the Yerush that he gave was made b'tois. Now, by contrast, if a healthy person gave all of his properties to others, he cannot later now retract what he said. The Tanaim discussed the case of one who gave away all his property and later, seeking to retrieve the property, claims that he was a goysis at that time, while the recipient maintains, no, he was healthy. So the Chayr is like this, Mi meitzim yad mi. Who is able to remove the property from the possession of whom? So the Gemara says, Who meitzim yadam b'lei re'iyah? He is able to remove his property held by others from their possession without needing to bring proof that he was a goysis at that time. And they may not remove the property from his possession if it's still in the possession of the property without proof that he was healthy. This is the words of Rabbi Yankiv. So again, he gave away all of his property. What does this guy say? No, you were a body. So he gets his stuff back. If Itaka was a body, the recipient has to prove that he was a body when he gave the matana. Rabbi Nassan says, in body who, if he is currently healthy, the obligation upon him to bring a proof that he was the shchimera. And if he is now a shchimera, he's on his deathbed, the obligation is upon him to bring upon them to bring proof that he was healthy at the time of. So the Gemara suggests, let us say that Rav is with the opinion of Rav Nassan, that one's current status is we look at the current status, and Shmuel spoke in accordance to the opinion of Rav Yankiv, who holds that the question of whether he was a shchimera remains a suffix, and they may not claim the property from him, even if he's now healthy. Gemara says no. Rav could say, I could hold Rav Yankiv. Over there, Rav Yankiv is the opinion that because it said that leave the property in its previous status, so the property should remain where it is. But here, with regard to the question about a young woman becoming now a beger, shall we say establish the body according to the previous status? The previous status is that the fact is that the body was due to mature. Shmuel says no. I can say even according to Rabbi Nassan, since Rabbi Nassan holds his opinion that the current state is only there as everyone has a chazaka status of being healthy. So a person removes himself from this chazaka by claiming that he was a shchimera goysis. So now, it falls upon him to bring a raya. But here, does she remove herself from the chazaka that was present? There's no chazaka that she was a begeris woman in the morning. Okay, the Gemara says, let us say that the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel is parallel to the machlekes between these tanaim. With regards to a case where her father was mekadosh her on the way when he was traveling. In the meantime, she was mekadosh herself in the city. And now she's a begeres, Tanachada. So one brisa says, How do you begeres Lefenenu? She's a grown woman at present, and her father cannot currently accept Kidushin, therefore the Kidushin does not take effect what her father did. Tani Dach, and another brisa, Chashina Kidushin Shneim, that we are concerned with regard to both Kidushin. My love, Chad Kirav, and Chad Kishmol. So we see that Rav and Shmuel, each one has a brisa according to their opinions. So the Gemara says, no. Idi Vidi Kishmol, I can tell you both brisas according to Shmuel. Kam be mach chashtoi. Here in the brisa is referring to a case where she denies his right to be Mekadosh, as she claims that she was a begeris woman from the Kiddushin. And Kam Misha Ein Mekasher there is referring to a situation where she does not deny his right to be Mekadosh, and therefore it's a suffix which Kiddushin takes effect. Now, the Gemara asks, let us say that since the Brises do not disagree, the opinions of the Amoraim, Rabbi Shmuel also do not disagree. One is referring to a case where she denies her rights, father's rights to be Mekadosh, while the other one is referring to where she doesn't deny it. Do you really think that? Rav Yosef, the son of Menashe, performed an action in the case in accordance to the opinion of Rav and did not take the father's Kiddushin into account. And Shmuel was very offended and said, he said that, sarcastically, is wisdom measured out to everyone in a small measure and measured out to this member of the Chacham in a large measure? In other words, he was angry with Rabbi Yosef that he had the chutzpah to rule against him in this case. And if you say that I don't disagree, why was Shmuel offended? So the Gemara says, perhaps Rabbi Yosef performed an action, and he did so in an instance where she denied her father's rights to be Mekadosh, in which case Shmuel would agree that the father's Kiddushin does not take effect. Rather, it must be that Rav and Shmuel did disagree, and Rabbi Yosef must have paskin in the case of a woman who did not deny her father's rights to the Kiddushin, which explains why Shmuel took exception to this halacha. Is this what Meimar said? Sorry, this is what Meimar said. Hilchas say the Shmuel, halacha like Shmuel, but Rav Ashi Amar Hilchas say the Rav, and who's the halacha like? The Hilchas Kidav. The halacha is the Rav. The halacha is like Rav. So the Mishnah that Rav says we're not chayshish to the father. We look at the current status. Zog the Mishnah. With regards to a person who went overseas with his wife, now, a person goes overseas with his wife, returns with his wife, and now he has children. He said, this is the woman who went overseas with me, and these are her children. So, she's not required, he is not required to bring proof with regards to the yuchsin of the woman, since her yuchas was already investigated at the time they got married, and also not in regards to the yuchsin of the children. Now, if he returned without the woman, and he said, my wife died, but I had children, he has to bring proof that the children were born to his wife. And maybe but he does not need to bring proof with regards to the yuchas of the woman. Isha nasasim dinasayam. If he left when he was unmarried and said upon his return, Isha nasasim dinasayam, I married a woman overseas. Harihi and this is she, and these are our children. Maybe Isha, so he has to bring a proof that he married a good woman, a yuchas, but he does not need to bring a raya on the children. Mesav elubana. If he said, I married a woman midinasayam and she died, and ve'elubana, these are the children, he has to bring a raya on both. Yeah. Okay. All of these statements that he's not required to bring proof with regard to yuchas of the children are said in a case where they cling to her and treat the woman like her mother. Okay, we'll stop here by Tanur Rabbanon.